Okay, so good evening, all our seniors and colleagues from Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society and also from All India Ophthalmological Society to this second part that we are taking over with the help of Dr. Hari. The first part that we had a very good success. We had received a lot of good feedback about it, and that was on GIPSA insurance and how we can benefit from it. And the second part is also very important, and this is going to be on GST. The goods and the service taxes, as we know, has now replaced the service taxes and the VAT in majority of our country. And ophthalmology, or generally, as we know, that healthcare is exempted from that. But there are certain avenues in which we should know when the GST becomes applicable. And now this is a big question in mind of many practitioners, whether they should actually have GST or not, because many of them, they run their own pharmacy or they have their own opticals, and many times they are in cosmetic procedures as well. So take us through whether we should take GST or not. We have experts with us. And before we go to that, I would like to introduce our chairman, Dr. Santosh Bhide sir. Dr. Santosh Bhide sir is the honorary president of Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society. He's a leading anterior segment surgeon of Pune and past also treasurer of Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society as well. So I would like to request Dr. Bhide sir to give his welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Vardhaman. And I would like to congratulate you for taking this topic of GST for all of us, because as a doctor, we are mostly unaware whether we should go into GST or not. Friends, we all know that GST is a unified tax system which has replaced multiple indirect taxes like value-added tax, service tax, even octroi. I remember that previously when we used to buy equipments, we had to pay octroi, which was initially 3%, and later on in 2008, I had to pay almost 7% of octroi on my phaco machine Infinity. So the cost of the machine was 30 lakhs and octroi was 2.1 lakh rupees. So that GST has replaced that, and it was a historic day on 1st of July, I think 2017. In the session, the President of India and the Government of India launched on the midnight of 1st of July goods and service tax. And there are 5 different slabs ranging from 0%, 5%, 12% to 28%. And as a doctor, as an ophthalmologist, whether we should enroll ourselves into GST or not, whether we should charge our patients for GST or not, there are many questions. As we are aware that GST is applicable to only cosmetic procedures like laser hair removal or laser procedures in dermatology. And of course, I feel that laser refractive surgery, being a cosmetic surgery, we may have to pay GST on those procedures as well. We have esteemed panel in the form of CA, Mr. Vignesh, and of course, our own member, Hari Krishnan, is also there to enlighten us on what is exempt from GST, what services are incorporated or taxable in GST, and how to go about it. So I think this webinar is going to be extremely useful for all of us, and I am sure that it will be more useful for prolific laser refractive surgeons like you, Vardhaman. I think it is going to be maximally useful for you and Dr. Anaga. So over to you, and let's begin with our program on GST.
Thank you so much, sir, for your welcome address. And thank you for all your guidance and support always. Before we go to the speakers, I would like to also introduce our esteemed panelists. The first is our honorary dynamic secretary, Dr. Anaga Herur. She is currently also the ARC representative for the Western Zone in All India Ophthalmological Society and the medical director of Anil Eye Hospital, the group of eye hospitals. And we would like to also congratulate her for the new branch opening that is going to be done very soon. And along with her, we have Dr. Vivek Motebar. He is the current treasurer of Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society. And he has been in anterior segment and medical retina practice for last 18 years as a private practitioner in the city of Nanded. He has also done his phaco fellowship from Shankar Nethralaya, which is called as the Sir Ratan Tata FECO Fellowship as well. And joining us is also Dr. Aditi Vatve. Dr. Aditi is a specialized oculoplastic surgeon. She's alumnus of KEM Hospital in Mumbai, and she did her oculoplastics from the prestigious LV Prasad Eye Institute, and she practices oculoplastics, ocular oncology, and also in Mumbai, and she did her oculoplastics, ocular aspects in Kolhapur. So welcome Dr. Anaga, Dr. Vivek sir, and Dr. Aditi to this webinar. Yes. So now I think without wasting further time, we would like to start with this very exciting session. And the first speaker is our own Dr. Hari Krishnan Vanadil. He has been alumnus of the prestigious AFMC, where he did his MBBS as well as the post graduation. After that, he also cleared his DNB. He has a large experience as also ex-army medical officer. Therefore, he does possess a diverse skill encompassing administrative, man management, finance, and clinical tasks. He has presented in numerous national and international conferences, showcasing his expertise in various ophthalmological practices. Dr. Hari has also established his own eye center in Hyderabad, which is Iris Eye Care, which has 3 locations in Hyderabad now, where he practices both surgical and medical ophthalmology. But along with that, he also offers consultancy services on a variety of topics such as practice management, specialization in the health insurance, financial compliances, and administrative documentation as well. He is currently the founder, director of Iris Mediworks, which is a medical equipment design and fabrication startup, as well as consultancy as well. So I think with his great understanding of clinical ophthalmology and also practice management and the financial market as well, Dr. Hari is a great asset for this series. And I would like to now invite Dr. Hari to give us an introduction about GST. Over to you, Dr. Hari.
So, good evening, everyone. This is the second time I'm coming on this Maharashtra Ophthalmic Society webinar. Last time being GIPSA and health insurance. So, in the time, Dr. Vardhaman had contacted that what all topics we can do on practice management. So one of the topic that came to light is GST. Now, interestingly, a lot of hospitals in an eye ophthalmology hospital, what happens is we end up using opticals, pharmacy, and also nowadays with intraocular lenses. The company is asking for a GST invoice for insurance and other policies. So the importance of GST has increased. And as you can see, when the GST was introduced, the healthcare was exempted, but slowly, few of the items in healthcare is being brought under GST. Now, when I set up my own hospital, what I did is I set it up as a company and then started a hospital under it. So I had GST registration from day one, and we had gone through a lot of calculations that whether it is feasible, not feasible. And people like Vignesh, Vignesh is my CA interaction everywhere. Any doubts I have, so he is the person to go to. So although we end up brainstorming a lot, like I always give him some new thing to think about that. Vignesh, yaar, ye wala section no interesting lag raha hai. So then we will think about it. That so he is one of the person who has guided me a lot, and as we have discussed a lot of things in about a hospital. So GST is very important to know as a practitioner, because it's something like when you earn you are a salaried person, you know about your income tax, but when you are in a business enterprise, you should know about GST. It's as simple as that it's a mandatory, it's a basic day-to-day knowledge that you should be having in order to go ahead in life. So if you are a private practitioner having your own setup, and you have a clinic, even with a simple optical or a simple pharmacy, you should have a good idea of GST, how to do the compliances, because it's not easy and it's not difficult as well. Once you understand it, it is very easy. But if you feel that you don't want to understand it and you stay aloof, it will always appear to be a mystery. So that's the reason I'm not an authority in this accounting factors. So I thought it's better to have a very qualified person to speak on it. So the idea is to give you an insight initially and then take on questions from the audience as the session goes on. So I won't take much of time because this is not my core area of expertise. I would like to hand it over to Vignesh. Vardhaman sir, you can take it.
Yeah. Dr. Hari, will you be presenting or
No,
will
sir. Nothing. No presentation. We will be on our interaction basis.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll be presenting for a brief introduction, and then we'll take care of the. You can give me the sharing access whenever it's the time is right.
Perfect. Perfect. So thank you so much, Dr. Hari, and thank you for bringing in CA Vignesh. I would like to introduce our next speaker, CA Vignesh. He's a third generation chartered accountant and a passionate. He's very passionate about indirect taxation. So he's qualified as CA in the year 2012. So that means that he's practicing as a CA for last 11 years. He is a practicing chartered accountant and is currently partner in the firm Sekar and Suresh, CA, a firm established in 1993. He heads the indirect tax department in that firm, and he has also worked with multinational accounting firms such as EY, Deloitte, etc. He has addressed numerous seminars and trained close to 1,000 professionals, students, and government officers on GST, and is recognized by the ICAI as a faculty for disseminating the knowledge pertaining to GST. He is associated with Board of Studies and ICAI and a faculty for CA Final Indirect Taxation as well. His presentations are marked with clarity and humor and have been proven to be a great source of learning to professionals and businessmen across the country. So, CA Vignesh, we are very fortunate to have you in this webinar, and from MOS, we would like to welcome you and thank you again. And over to you, CA Vignesh, for your presentation, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Vardhaman. Thank you very much, Dr. Hari. Thanks to Dr. Santosh, Dr. Vivek, Dr. Ranaga, Dr. Rahul, and Raditi. It's a great privilege for me to address this due to this medium of Zoom. I'm able to connect with ophthalmologists across the country. And it's a very interesting topic what Dr. Hari has suggested for me, because a lot of times what happens in our quest to give specialized treatments, we tend to neglect the financial side of it. There are a lot of things we tend to ignore because, especially for the doctors, the brains are focused towards giving the specialized treatment, learning the advancements in medical technologies, due to which the important part of your compliance takes kind of a backseat. So this is a very, very important seminar or webinar, especially for doctors, because GST, especially since 2017, has become an integral part of every chartered accountant's practice and every businessman's doubts and queries, because every quarter the GST Council meets and a lot of changes keep happening in the law. As Dr. Hari rightly said, healthcare services was exempt when in 2017, which when the law had come, but now we have certain services which are chargeable to tax. So what I would do is I will just give you a brief presentation about the GST impact on healthcare services and certain important points to be kept in mind. Now, this presentation will be useful for the doctors who run their own clinics, who have their own hospital set up. For them, it is more critical, because whether the first question what any doctor faces when he opens a medical establishment is whether he has to go for a GST registration or not. Ideally, whenever he calls a CA or consultant, the answer straight away is no. But there are multiple layers to it, because it all depends on what all you're doing. Are you just looking at medical consultation? Are you just looking at surgeries? Or are you even looking at a trading activity within your establishment? Are you even going to sell spectacles? Are you even going to sell contact lenses, right? So these things also need to be kept in mind when you are deciding whether you have to go for a GST registration or not. So I'll just share a brief presentation. I do have sharing access, I guess, right, sir?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, so so I'll just give you a brief about how exactly all this started and what exactly we have to keep in mind with regard to the healthcare services. So if you see here, I straight away, without wasting much time, I will just, in brief, I'm presuming all of us know what exactly GST. GST is the tax what you charge on the supply of services. Important supply. For any tax, we have a taxable event, which is in GST, it is a supply. So here, whenever there is a supply of goods or supply of services, it is the responsibility for the taxpayer to collect the GST from their customer. But when it comes to healthcare services, the government has exempted healthcare services in general because they did not want to burden the common person who is spending money for his medical treatment. So because of this, the government felt that healthcare services needs to be exempted, and therefore it brought this healthcare services into the exemption criteria. So when I talk about exemptions in GST, there are a number of services which are covered in that, which are exempt. Some examples are definitely one is your healthcare services, one is your educational services, which is provided by the schools, and many other services are there. So I'm going to focus only upon what healthcare services, what exactly the exemption states here, so that we get a clarity straight away. So if we take it one by one, first one is veterinary clinic in relation to healthcare of animals or birds. So these are also totally exempt. And services by way of healthcare services by clinical establishment, authorized medical practitioner, or paramedics. All these, any services pertaining to healthcare which is being provided by these particular institutions or entities are exempt from GST. They need not get a GST registration. When do you have to get a GST registration? If your services are chargeable to GST and your total gross receipts in 1 year exceeds more than rupees 20 lakhs. That is when you need to get a GST registration. But if all your services are exempt and your turnover crosses 20 lakhs also, you need not get a GST registration, because only your taxable supply should cross rupees 20 lakhs, right? And then services provided by way of transportation of patient in an ambulance other than those specified above. So even if you're engaging in this particular service of transportation on ambulance, then also it is considered as a healthcare service. You may not have a hospital. You may just have the service of providing ambulance facility. Still, that also comes under the healthcare services. So it is very important to, before that, this is a recent change which has been done, quite recent, which says that if you are a hospital or a clinical establishment, if you have a non-ICU or non-NICU room, for which you are charging more than rupees 5,000 per day, okay, then this is chargeable to GST. As I told you, this was not there in 2017, where again, there are some luxury hospitals which charges more, where the patient would like to be in a 5-star setup. So there the government felt that GST can be made applicable. So this is a recent change which has come. If you have a room facility in your clinical establishment and a non-ICU facility and you're charging more than rupees 5,000, you need to get yourself registered under GST and start charging. You don't have any other option here. And then there's another entry also which pertains to healthcare services, cord blood banks by way of preservation of stem cells, etc. This also comes under the healthcare services. So it is very important for us to understand what exactly is this healthcare services, and it is defined in the GST law as well. So healthcare services can range between. So our view of healthcare services may differ from another person. So therefore, to avoid this confusion, the GST law has clearly given an explanation for healthcare services. So these are all what is covered here. Okay, so it's very simple. It means any service by way of diagnosis or treatment or care for illness, injury, deformity, abnormality, or pregnancy in any recognized system of medicines in India. This is again important. Any system of medicines which is recognized in the country, only treatment or diagnosis under that comes under the healthcare services, and also includes services by way of transportation of the patient to and from a clinical establishment. What it excludes, this is where is important for us, especially for ophthalmologists or cosmetic or plastic surgeons, or even there's another maxillofacial surgeon. For such particular doctors, where we have to take a call whether this is a medical kind of service or whether it is a cosmetic kind of service. This differentiation is important for us because that does not come under the healthcare service. So therefore, it does not include hair transplant. Hair transplant is not covered, or cosmetic or plastic surgery. straight away not covered. However, there is an exception. Whether, except when it is undertaken to restore or reconstruct anatomy or functions of body affected due to congenital defects, development abnormalities, injury, or trauma. I think all of you will follow this much better than I can understand this. So it's very, very clear that if there is a surgery which is required to reconstruct the anatomy, which is very much required from a medical point of view, without this, the person will not be able to go through his livelihood in a proper manner. Then only it is exempt. But in case if it is a regular plastic surgery or a regular cosmetic surgery, which is not needed, it is just for beautification of that person's body parts. If it is for that particular reason, it is covered under GST. It is not considered as healthcare services. This is where we as ophthalmologists have to take a call as to when it is in relation to a healthcare and when it is not healthcare. So in our domain, if we provide services which are not pertaining to healthcare, then it is very important for us to immediately obtain a GST registration and collect GST from such patients to whom we are rendering non-healthcare services. I hope I was clear here. So this was the exception which is mentioned. As I told you, some other important issues, we'll just now cover a few issues what we will regularly face. As I told you here, the first one, inpatients, non-ICU room is there. The patient needs to be admitted in the hospital. You are charging more than 5,000 per day. You have to get yourself registered under GST. Very simple. The second important one, freelance services provided by doctors to hospitals. So all hospitals or clinical establishments have consultant doctors. So when a consultant doctor provides a service to the hospital, technically he doesn't provide the service directly to the patient. So there may be an interpretation that it is not healthcare services, but it is a consultant service to the hospital. So there also the clarification is given. That also comes under healthcare services. If you're a consultant doctor, you're providing consultancy services to a hospital, you need not get yourself registered under GST. It is totally exempt. Then the next one is if a patient is admitted in your hospital and you are providing the patient's food. This is also a common occurrence. What does that, what impact that does have? It says that if you are an inpatient and you are being provided food by the doctor or nutritionist, that also comes under the healthcare domain and need not tax it. But of course, if the patient has attendants or visitors, there is a canteen set up in the hospital where he goes and purchases the products. This again will be chargeable tax because that doesn't come under healthcare because it is technically not the patient who is purchasing those particular goods or services. Another very interesting aspect which is very frequent, renting of part of premises of clinical establishment. A lot of pharmaceutical companies would like to place their hoardings on certain parts of your clinical establishment with a light and etc. just to magnify their brand. It can be any sort of lens like Bosch for contact lenses or any of the other brands for that matter. So if you are giving a part of your clinical establishment on rent to any particular pharma company or a medical equipment manufacturer, and he pays you some consideration for that, it comes under the advertisement services. It is not related to healthcare in any way. So it comes under the advertisement services and you are charging an amount for him so that he can display his particular advertisement to the patients who come and visit your clinical establishment. Very, very common occurrence. There also it is not healthcare services. You have to charge GST on this, right? So these are some issues which you may face. Then further important other things, if you're selling implants or medical equipment on your own account, see how does this work? Sometimes the manufacturer of the medical equipment sells directly to the patient. This is one scenario. Then you are nowhere involved, right? So there is no GST applicability whatsoever. In some cases, you may rent out a part of the clinical establishment to another optician who sets up his business there. You're not related in any way. You just charge rent from him. On that rent, again, GST will come. That is not a healthcare service. That is one aspect. And the second aspect is when you yourself purchase and you sell it on your clinic's name. You purchase it from the clinic and you sell it on your clinic's name. this also will again be chargeable to GST, because the product which you are purchasing is chargeable to GST. So the moment you sell it, that also becomes chargeable to GST. Here also you have to take a GST registration. Now the next question which comes in most of our minds here. I provide lot of consultation service, which comes under the healthcare domain. That is not subject to GST. Apart from that, I also sell, say, spectacles or contact lenses, which comes under GST. So what happens to my input tax credit? Now, what do you mean by input tax credit? During the course of your business, you have a lot of business expenses on which you pay the GST. Examples, you take a clinical establishment on rent, you pay rent to the landlord, he will definitely charge you GST. You engage an advertisement agency to highlight your particular clinic across the hoardings or across social media. He will give you a GST invoice, you pay GST invoice there. Like this, there are multiple expenses on which you pay the GST. If you have a GST registration, you can adjust whatever you've paid on the expenses, the GST, whatever you've paid against the expenses, you can adjust that against whatever you're collecting from your patient. But in case you have GST, in case you do services which are not subject to GST, which are exempt, such adjustment is not possible. You cannot adjust that input tax credit against, if your core service is exempt, then there is no question of adjustment. So the main question here is, if you have two types of services, one is exempt, one is taxable. What is exempt here? Your consultation is exempt. What is taxable here? Your sale of spectacles, contact lenses, or cosmetic surgeries are taxable. So how do you claim the input tax benefit? The first step, what we have to keep in mind is identify the inputs which are specifically attributable to the taxable products or services. How do you do that? I purchase a specs from a manufacturer. It can be Ray-Ban or it can be any other brand for that matter. I purchase it from that company and I sell it to my patient. Very simple, one-to-one correlation is there. I purchase from the vendor, I pay the GST to him. I sell it to my patient. So therefore, it is specifically attributable to the taxable supply. So I can claim the input tax credit, no questions asked. The second situation, what about the inputs attributable to exempt supply? What does this mean? Now you have a machine for testing your power. I think all of you will be having it. You procure that machine. You use it only for the purpose of consultation. You procure that machine so that you can test the power, test the eyesight of your patients and provide them the service. So GST, what you pay on that equipment, you cannot claim the input tax credit. Why you cannot claim it? Because it is attributable to the exempt service to what you are providing. That is the second scenario. The third scenario, it becomes very interesting here. The common ones. The common input tax credit. What are the common input tax credit? You pay rent for a premises. In that premises, you do consultations, you do cosmetic surgeries, and you also do sale of products. So how do we do that in that case? Because this input tax credit, you cannot specifically attributable. You cannot actually sit and measure the square feet, what you're dedicated towards shops, what you're dedicated towards surgeries. That is practically not possible. So the rule here is, how do we do this? You can claim the input tax credit based on the turnover per month. Let me give you an example. If you do medical consultations worth 50,000 rupees per month and you sell spectacles, say 20,000 rupees per month. Okay, so 50,000 into 20,000, the proportion, that is 2 by 7 in this case. 2 by 7 of the common input tax credit you can claim. This is what the rule says. It totally is dependent on the monthly turnover what you make. This decides what is the input you're supposed to claim. Proportionate input tax credit can be claimed. This is what you'll have to remember. So if you take a GST registration, all this will come. Till you take a GST registration, nothing of this sort will come. The moment you take a GST registration, all these issues you have to keep in mind. Yeah, so these are some examples what I wanted to give you. From my side, I thought it will be relevant for you. And also with regard to capital assets. That is, you're taking an equipment which is used for both the exempt as well as the taxable services. In this particular situation, the rule says that you have to divide the input over a period of 5 years. 5 years is to be considered as a useful life. This is with regard to investment in big equipments. But again, the main criteria here is you should use that equipment both for exempt and taxable services. If you're using it only for exempt service, there is no question of claiming any input tax credit. So that's it from my side. I just highlighted some issues, what we have to keep it in mind. I hope it was of useful for you. Now I'm glad to take up questions if anyone has with regard to whatever we have discussed or anything else as well, which you have faced in your daily routine and wherever you have any queries, doubts, we can take it.
Vardhaman sir, I would like to, take a minute here. Okay. Vignesh sir, with your permission, I will like just there was a small tool which I had made some time back when I was doing my analysis for. Can you see them? Can you see my screen, sir?
Yes, yes.
So this is basically a small calculator which I made in order to see how much is the proportionate taxation that Vignesh has just told.
Okay.
So if I have a turnover of around 10,000 for opticals, 10,000 for pharma, and I do IOL invoicing separately of 10,000, and I do consultation fee and everything of maybe 50,000. So total GST exempt items that I'm doing is 30,000. Total GST, sorry, exempt is 50,000, applicable billing is 30,000. Now, when I look at the expenses, the things that I buy, my pharma purchases this much, IOL purchases, capital expenses, this thing. So total GST is this much. So the proportionate between the taxable and non-taxable is 0.38. So total input credit which I have is 5,37,000. Claimable input is 2,01,000. So GST due to the government is in negative. That means I don't have to pay a GST to the government. My input is adjusted. Now, at the same time, if my optical turnover happens to be, 2 lakhs, and the entire GST and all when you calculate. So this is basically a small illustration that how we do this entire calculation in a hospital setup, in a eye hospital. Because so another thing is here what is happening is this capital expenses, OT purchases, whatever I did it is basically offset to some extent when you have an optical and pharma, because just like Vignesh said, when you have an AR machine, that AR machine is used for your routine consultation as well as selling spectacles.
Right.
We have a lensometer that works both ways. So these are common assets. Like you have an air conditioner, there's an I'm sitting in the reception of my hospital and there's an air conditioner here. So it generally, the air conditioner is at 18% GST, it's a huge amount. So out of that, even if you can get a 10% of proportionate input, that will work out in favor of your rest of the things. So you will end up paying no GST per se, when you have a combined setup. As a combined setup. The reason being, we do a lot of GST applicable purchases and lot of GST exempt sales. So now in my situation, what I do is I have a common GST number, like Vignesh knows that. I have a common GST number for my pharmacy, for my opticals, and my consultation and everything. It's reported the same thing. So what happens is whatever purchases I do, even if I buy some item for my hospital, any maintenance or this thing, so that covers for the both expenses. Common. It's a common infrastructure expense. So I can take the GST for input of that proportion. Whereas what in my few interactions, what I've seen is doctors in the same premises maintain 3 different GST numbers because they don't want to show the income. So they maintain pharmacy separate GST number, optical separate GST number, hospital separate GST number. So, Vignesh, do you think that is a justified thing to do, or you tend to lose in that?
See, it definitely gives you a convenience if you have multiple GST registration number. It definitely gives you a convenience. You don't have the headache of calculating this common input and how much you can claim and how much you cannot, because it's pretty straightforward. The moment you have a GST number for pharmacy, whatever you purchase, whatever you sell, other than that, you'll not have any other common expenses. So definitely it gives you, the comfort of calculating easily is definitely there. But in case you have one GST number, if you are willing to go through the exercise of doing this common input tax credit claiming and how much is proportionately attributable, definitely it is more saving compared to the separate GST numbers. And also your compliance is much better. Otherwise, 3 GST numbers, you have to keep filing your returns for each GST number and all of that.
Yeah, and pay the CA also. So anyway.
Last question.
I'll be silent there.
Yes, Dr. Bidey, sir, please.
In a nice talk by Vignesh and of course by Hari. So in your talk, Vignesh, you said about turnover of 20 lakhs and
Correct.
taxable income of 20 lakhs. So
no, I mentioned taxable. Yeah, you can complete.
So turnover of 20 lakhs was, I think, initially, which you changed to 40 lakhs, if I'm not wrong.
Yes. I'll come to that. Initially, it started off with 20 lakhs.
Now then they changed to 40 lakhs. Then
yes, I'll just come to that. Aggregate turnover was 20 lakhs for the GST registration. It was made 40 lakhs for goods. That is, if you are only engaged in supply of goods. But if you are
not for doctors.
No, for supply of services, it continues to remain 20 lakhs. The amount has been changed to 40 lakhs only for supply of goods. That is, if you don't supply any services, your core nature is just supply of products, then it is 40 lakhs. Otherwise, it continues to remain 20 lakhs.
So for service providers, it is 20 lakhs.
Yes, it continues to remain 20 lakhs. It does not become 40 lakhs for service providers.
So that is a turnover, right?
Yes, it is the aggregate turnover in the preceding financial year. That is, if you want to check whether you're registered, you have to register for GST. Last financial year, that is April 2022 to March 2023, you will have to check what is your aggregate turnover, which comprises both of taxable and exempt services or products put together. If it is, say, more than 20 lakhs in that particular situation,
But does that mean that the services which are taxable, the turnover of those services or total services?
Entire service taken into consideration. I'll give you an example here. You are rendering
some services are non-taxable, no?
Yeah,
like
but when it comes to, I agree. But when the definition of aggregate turnover, which is given in GST, it includes the exempt turnover also. So let me give you an example to clarify your query here. If you have consultations which are exempt worth 18 lakhs in 1 year, that last year, and you're selling 4 lakhs worth of, say, optical products, your aggregate turnover still becomes more than 20 lakhs and you need to get yourself registered under GST. Only if all your gross receipts, all your turnover is exempt, and still it is more than 20 lakhs, you need not get yourself registered under GST.
No, but does that mean that if your turnover is more than 20 lakhs, you should register for GST?
If it is entirely exempt, then not required. If you have a taxable component, yes, you have to get yourself registered.
The taxable component is very minute. Let's say contact lens dispensing, which is very hardly any.
It is very minute, but the irony is the law is worded in such a way. It says aggregate annual turnover should be more than 20 lakhs. And the definition of aggregate turnover includes exempt supply also.
I think Hari is smiling. He wants to contribute something.
Sir, this ruling is just like the new income tax slab which has come out. Like, 6,99,999 no tax, but 7,01,000 rupees you pay the entire tax. So that is the thing. So it's something like that. If you have that, even a single item which you are supposed to give a GST bill, you want to give a GST bill, means you have to be under GST. Now, sir, there is one more thing is that nowadays there is something called a combined. You can always give a combined bill. Like in a healthcare setup, we have two parts of a bill that we give. One is goods and second is services. Okay, so the services in healthcare is exempted from GST. The goods are not. It's very simple, as simple as that. If I give you a bill from a hospital for 1 lakh rupees with 20,000 as surgeon fee, 20,000 as OT charges, and 20,000 as bed and room rent, less than 5,000. But I give you 10,000 worth of items, which are like syringes and pharmacy items, which are GST applicable. Okay, sir. So you have to give a GST invoice for all of those. If you in ophthalmology, it is yet to come into vogue. But if you go to a multi-specialty hospital at the moment of discharge, the bill that you get will be a main bill on top, which will have goods as well as services and the total amount. The services will not have a separate bill, but the goods will have separate additional bill from the pharmacy to support it. So basically, the moment you have any taxable item, even a single one, you are under the ambit of GST.
Yeah, and if you invoice from your side, that is. So in many cases, what happens is the doctor is not bothered about where you're purchasing the product from. I just provide the consultation, I take the charges from you, and I prescribe the products, whatever is to be given. That product is sold by the pharmacy, and that invoice is given by the pharmacy directly to the patient. In that situation, we don't have to get registered under GST because we are not raising the invoice to the patient. I mean, the product invoice.
Yeah, let's take a very practical question. Hari can understand that what I'm saying. Most of us are cataract surgeons and using implants. Dr. Hari. So in the bill, we do charge the implant actual cost, whatever company is charging us. We don't charge anything extra, not a single rupee is charged extra. Still, we have to register for GST.
If you take it only as a reimbursement, in this case, it is just a reimbursement. That is, you pay the same amount for the implant and you collect the same amount from the patient.
Correct. Yes.
It is just like a reimbursement. Then you need not get yourself registered under GST. But if you add a markup, sometimes you may procure the implants in bulk, right? And you may add some markup. Then it again becomes like a business where you have to invoice on your name. In the first example, what Dr. Santosh suggested, I would suggest you not to give the implant invoice on your clinic's name. Since you are anyways paying the same amount, why can't you give the invoice directly from the pharma company's name so that you don't have the headache of showing that in your books?
For reimbursement, we give the same implant, the same bill, whatever.
Simple. Whatever invoice is
just give it to the patient.
Yeah, whatever invoice is raised by your clinic, don't mention the implant in that. You just say consultation, surgery, and give the amount. For the implant, you attach that bill, whatever is raised by the respective pharmacy or the pharmaceutical product.
So when a hospital takes a GST, what is the problem? See, why do people don't take a GST registration? See, as far as I understand, with an electronic medical records and electronic billing and everything, filing and taking out a GST report and filing it is a pretty comparatively very easy procedure nowadays with this technology in hand. But Vinay sir, can you just give me an possibility that what are the things why a lot of people don't like to take a GST number?
See, number one, they don't want, the moment you take a GST registration, you have to give your KYC to the GST department. You have to give your bank statement to the GST department. And the department has all rights to write directly to your bank and get your bank statement. The department has this right. So a lot of people are not comfortable. Second is compliance. So though you may say that for you, you may have the view that it is a simple process. No one wants to have the headache of due dates. Every month before 10th, I have to file one GST return. Before 20th, another GST return. Give one OTP to the consultant or CA who does that. So no one wants to have this hassle. When they say that whenever this facility is given by the government, why can't I use it? It is an exempt service. I don't want the headache of GST, so I'm out of it. So it's mainly the mental block against getting yourself embroiled in one of the government legislations. There is definitely a mental block. You want to be away from the tax registration if you have that opportunity. So here you have an opportunity not to get registered in GST. So I might as well use it. So I think that is causing most of the medical institutions to not get themselves registered under GST.
Now, when you talk about the implants and medical devices and pharmacy, So hospitals end up buying items in bulk, and definitely we use as a retail, not retail sale in the sense, retail on patients. So in that situation, we definitely do a markup. See, hospitals we are a business. We are a business entity. We are a business entity. It is perfectly correct to do a reasonable markup on products. And in this reasonable markup of products, do you think that having a GC number helps you in being a legal business entity who is doing a markup?
See, having a GST registration, if you have this question, me as a hospital, do I require to get a GST registration? My answer would always be yes. The main reason for it is it gives greater transparency to whoever is looking at your entity. The moment you have a GST number printed on your signboard outside, there itself a positive impression is created that, okay, this person is reporting his entire sales on a monthly basis to the government. So the degree of transparency is more. And also, if we have a GST registration, as I mentioned in my presentation, we can claim that part of the common input tax credit wherever you have even a minor amount of taxable supply, the proportionate to the turnover, you can claim the common input tax credit. So why would you want to lose that? Because here in a hospital setup, if you ask me, my personal view is the medical establishment should be brought under GST at a nominal rate, like how it is done for jewelry. In jewelry, gold is chargeable to GST at the rate of 3%. So therefore, on a similar way, if a very small percentage of GST is made applicable to all healthcare services, be it 1% or 2%, this will enable the hospitals in claiming the input tax credit of the huge amounts what they spend for the infrastructure. Now they are losing out on that, because of which all that has become an added cost. So definitely, if you ask me, I would clearly say it's better you go for a GST registration. Of course, if there is absolutely no trace of taxable supply, there is absolutely nothing, it is all pure medical, pure healthcare services, then you don't need it at all. But if there is at least even a single small percentage of your revenue comes from a taxable supply, I would suggest you to go for a GST registration.
Okay.
Vignesh?
Yes, doctor.
Are chartered accountants also under GST? And how many percentage of chartered accountants have taken GST number?
And pretty much everyone have taken, because we are not exempt. I think lawyers have that edge over us this way. Their union is more strong. So they fought for GST not to come, and they have not yet come under the ambit. But we have to take GST. We don't have any other option.
Bide sir, I'll tell you, there's a change in the outlook nowadays. There are two terms. One is called as tax evasion, and second is tax avoidance.
Correct.
Okay. So if you look at around, 1 or 2 generations prior, where people used to, take cash bundles and keep it separate, and this thing, that is called as tax evasion. So nowadays the method is tax avoidance, where you show your income, you show your expense also, and show the balance and tilt it towards loss. So that is the way of tax avoidance. Now, big companies like Swiggy, Zomato is working on negative income, losses. Okay. So this is, now a CA will definitely take a GST. He will register his GST number. He will have his entire returns filed, but he will ensure that all his purchases is through Amazon Business and not through Amazon Normal.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll tell you what. I have a GST number. I go to Reliance Fresh or DMart. They have a GST billing counter. Okay. I buy choline, mop, room freshener, washing powder, day-to-day consumables. See, we might ignore it as small items, but these day-to-day consumables also matters. And these are common expenses. Right? So 10 rupees there, 50 rupees there, 10 rupees there, 50 rupees add on, it will come to around 500 rupees. That is the input tax for one IOL. Yeah. Got it? 2,000 rupees frame you are selling means that 12% you will get.
Input tax is used also on buying equipments. Also, we pay GST, no? So that can be set off. No?
See, that depends. Like if you, as Vignesh has said, okay, Vignesh said in the CA words, let me tell you in the ophthalmology words. Okay. So if I have a hospital whose turnover is 1 lakh rupees in opticals and 1 lakh rupees in surgery. So my share of exempt services and applicable services is 50-50%. So if I buy an equipment, for example, a television for the patients waiting in the common area, that is the optical and this area, and that is why an infrastructure expense. So I buy a TV, whatever is the input tax, I can claim 50% of it, but not the rest 50%. Vignesh sir, correct me if I am wrong.
Yes, see, it is purely what you have to decide.
Now, similarly, sir, let me finish that. So, if it is a FACO machine, which is a purely to do an exempt service,
Correct.
then we don't have any way of claiming it.
Yes, we can't claim that.
AR, auto ref, a lensometer, you can claim it. You can buy a slit lamp chair unit, you may claim it. You buy a printer, you can claim it. You buy a phone, you can claim it. So you hire a third party for any services, digital marketing, you can claim it. But you bought by an OT table, you cannot claim it.
I think procuring a GST number is like a double-edged sword. How you use it is most important.
You have to use it and you have to constantly monitor it. If you just take it and just for namesake you file the returns, then you'll not reap the true benefit. You need to actually sit every month, understand what is your sales, what you have made, what is taxable, what is exempt, how much you can claim, and accordingly follow the law. And most important, you need to keep track of the developments. Like this 5,000 ICU was a bolt out of the blue. 5,000 non-ICU rooms, no hospital was prepared for that. But you have hospitals which charges more than 5,000 per day for a non-ICU room. So they have to charge GST. So this thing was never there before. So now these hospitals have to get a GST registration. They don't have any choice.
And surgical procedures like squint and ptosis, those who are doing oculoplasty, should they charge GST to the patient?
Sir, in squint and
oculoplasty procedure.
Sir, no, not always, sir. See, understand, not every oculoplasty procedure is cosmetic. Now, if a person getting a squint surgery done at an age of 40-50 years, we can still argue it as cosmetic. But a 5-year-old kid undergoing a squint surgery, it's always a functional surgery. Now, with refractive, yes, the argument can go in a very different way. Oculoplasty, yes, ptosis is a condition that requires treatment. See, sir, the thing is, with the quality of life and health, that line is very, somebody is morbid, obese, going and getting a bariatric surgery and liposuction done, whether it is cosmetic or not, is a very thin line. And it depends on us to define where it lies.
Does that depend on us or does that depend on the GST person who sees your file?
Good question.
Mr. Vignesh, you can answer.
As such, GST predominantly is a self-assessment tax. As in, we ourselves first, we have to decide whether we can claim or not in consultation with your CA or a GST expert. Arrive at whether we can claim this or not, form an opinion and claim that and file the return. So it is a self-assessment tax. We have to do the assessment first on our own and file the returns. You can do whatever you want. You can not claim as well because the first stage is always self-assessment. But the moment you file the returns, the department has a random system in place which sees certain red flags and picks up those returns, and the department issues a notice to such persons asking them to explain why they didn't pay or why they took excess credit and all of that. So at that point of time, you will have to, in case you have committed a mistake, at that point of time, you'll have to pay the entire thing along with 18% per annum interest. In some cases, it is also 24% per annum. So it is better to very carefully analyze what is the credit we are claiming, what is the amount what we are paying, and take a very cautious and conservative approach. If you feel that this may be subject to any sort of notice or penalty, better don't claim that.
So what we do is, Vignesh sir, I think we can, our methods, Mr. Vignesh is my own hospital CA. So we always try to claim lesser than that we think we should.
Correct. That is the right approach, because that will ensure you don't receive unnecessary notices, because all those notices cause panic. And I mean, I'm very disappointed the way the department is handling interactions with the businessmen, because they directly call the person, because they have the mobile number, they straight away call them and tell them that please come to the office and explain and all of that. That's not the right way to do it. Though our Prime Minister said that the entire thing will become digital after GST is coming, they will only correspond over email, issue a notice before asking you to come. All that is practically not happening. Any person will get scared if a government official calls him and asks him to come to the department and all of that. I mean, we are all doing our regular business. This is the last thing what we have to, have on our minds.
What are the red flags you said which you should watch?
Red flags is claiming very lot of input tax credit. I mean, if you feel that you've purchased a machine which has a huge component of input tax credit, I would suggest, if it is very used majoritatively, if it is used for the exempt supply, I would suggest you not to claim that on, because when you claim the input tax credit, make sure you do a proper analysis and then claim up whatever is conservative and be very cautious about it. That is number one. And second is making sure your GST turnover matches whatever turnover you're showing in the income tax, because both the departments go hand in hand. Both can procure information from each other. If you say show so 20 lakhs in your GST returns and income tax return, obviously वो loan वाला पीछे पड़ेगा, वो बोलेगा भाई income ज़्यादा दिखाओ, आपको loan अच्छा खासा मिलेगा. So we end up getting very motivated and we show huge turnover in the income tax. There is a huge mismatch. The GST fellow will be after us saying that, "Arey boss, your income tax is showing 1 crore, but in GST you are showing only 20 lakhs, 80 lakhs per GST code." So these are some things what we have to make sure that you need to, it all needs to be aligned. Whatever you're showing in your books, whatever you're showing in your GST, whatever you're showing on your income tax, all should match. If there is a difference also, you should know why such difference is there.
Why should there be difference between GST turnover and your total turnover?
Yeah, because GST law says that you have to pay GST on advances also. Now, if I collect, I mean, this won't apply in our field, but if I'm a regular supplier of services, I collect an advance from my customer. The GST department, if you collect an advance for a service, you have to collect GST on that. But I will not show that as income. I show that as income only once I provide the service and I issue the invoice. So in that case, there may be a difference.
Sir, a few
question which, okay, please go ahead.
Direct questions, like a doctor with a single proprietorship can apply for a GST in his name or his proprietorship's name?
It's either ways. If you want to give a name for that, there is a column for trade name specifically. You can do it on your trade name. The benefit for that is you can open a bank account on that particular name. So some practitioners will want to brand their clinics with some name.
So basically what you're saying is that a single proprietor with a trade name of whatever can open a GST, can take a GST number in that trade name and will be able to take a bank account also in the same name with a GST certificate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Next, sir.
Here I would say a lot of people commit an error. See, what usually happens is the moment we take a registration on a trade name, many people are under the false impression that business का turnover पूरा वो account में ले लेंगे and जो भी जिस पे भी हमको tax भरना नहीं है वो personal account में ले लेंगे. Make sure you don't do that, because whether you take it in the personal account or whether you take it in the current account, it is one and the same, because your PAN card only is linked to that. It is not a separate entity altogether. So be very careful with that aspect.
Sir.
Dr. Aditi has some question. Dr. Aditi,
so this question was regarding some, there are many training courses which are paid. So if somebody is conducting some paid training course, what does it come under? Like, does GST apply to that?
Yes, it does. If you're into training, see, GST is exempt only on educational services which gives a degree recognized by the law in force. So as in like an MBBS degree or an MD degree or a BCom degree or a 10th or 12th class, if you get only such educational services are exempt. But any sort of training, for example, I decide to train all doctors in GST for a 10-day or a 12-day program, and I charge, of course, for that, then it will be chargeable to GST. There's no exemption for that.
So basically, Mr. Vignesh will have to take a GST registration. collect 1,000 rupees as the fee for the program, and
Correct.
18% GST, because in
Yes.
this 18% GST, that is 180 rupees.
Correct. Correct.
And after the 1,180 rupees that he collects, he will deposit 180 rupees under his GST account number into the government treasury, and he will file the returns for the same.
Correct.
So, ma'am, fellowships fees is generally comes under GST. MCH DM fees doesn't come under GST.
Okay, that's what precisely I just wanted to ask.
Yes, Mike, I got that. I got
Yeah.
that. Fellowship fee, training program fee comes under the ambit of GST. I don't know whether people are collecting or not. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But because fellowship and this thing is not given by any certified body, whereas DNB, FNB, MCH, these courses are exempt from GST.
So another question, like simple, if somebody is starting their own setup, what would be like your a general guideline for any person who is actually starting the practice? When should they think about the turnover and like get their GST number done? So, like for somebody who is new.
Yeah, see, if anyone wants to start off, the first thing what we have to do is to decide what kind of services we are, or what kind of business what we are going to do. If it is purely healthcare services, if it is nothing related to sale of products, nothing related to cosmetic surgeries, okay, and all such services, what Dr. Hari has mentioned, just you don't go for a GST initially. Even when your turnover reaches 20 lakhs also, at that point of time, we can take a call whether it is required or not. So once you start your practice, anyways, we will not enjoy a lot of input tax credit because majority of our services are exempt from GST. So the moment you start your practice, I would suggest you to wait till your turnover touches the figure of 20 lakhs per annum. Once it touches 20 lakhs per annum, you sit and review what are the kind of services what you provide. If you feel that there is a cosmetic service portion along with the major healthcare services, then you go for a GST registration. Otherwise, till then, I wouldn't suggest you to go for it because it just adds to your compliance cost.
That cosmetic portion, whether the turnover of that cosmetic portion should cross 20 lakhs or
no, the entire turnover. Even if, as I told you, my clarification, your medical turnover can be 18 lakhs. Or even it can be 19 lakhs. If your cosmetic is 2 lakhs, still you have to go for a GST registration.
So I started my practice 4 years back. I took GST number from day one. Now, my point of view of taking it, Vignesh sir, you can correct me wherever it is deviating. So my point of view for taking a GST registration is because I was very clear that from day one, I'm going to run an optical, pharmacy, hospital together, and also I wanted to get into a corporate structure from day one, where it's a separate company and the company is running the hospital. It becomes easier. It becomes easier to hand over the hospital to somebody on a later date. It becomes
Correct.
a business entity. It becomes a separate unit.
Correct.
And I'm just a director and a partner of it. So it's a separate unit in itself. So, and I wanted the entire transactions to be recorded and the finances to be shown so that over a period of time, the value of the overall business is shown and I get a better valuation whenever I am planning to, give it over or whatever. So that is one reason. Like I benefited from that experience just now because I went to apply for a loan for the car, for a vehicle. I was planning and my income proof didn't show much. They said, sir, aapka jo hospital hai, uska GST number bata do. I just gave the GST number. They took out the entire turnover and they said, sir, your eligibility is there. They issued the loan. So this has happened recently. So I think that is one place where I find that GST is beneficial to track and give a value to your business as a, the entire value to the business it gives you in a single window.
Okay, another thing, like while we are actually giving a billing to the patient, as you told that it is better not to include all the something like lens or implants, But when we give it as a package, we do include something which is called as consumables, which includes the gloves, syringes, everything as a package. So what is your like view about that? Like when we give package, we do have all those headings while charging the patient.
Vignesh, I'll take this question. Okay.
No problem.
Ma'am, ma'am, see, the thing is, healthcare package, when you take it as a single item billing, for example, MICS or phacoemulsification with Indian foldable, total 25,000, you are not supposed to give a breakup. The moment you give a breakup, you are supposed to have a GST invoice. Period. You either club everything into a single item, like one Maharaja Thali, 100 rupees. It doesn't matter. Whatever is club, gloves, whatever you include in that. As a composite supply.
So then does it also mean that all the hospitals which are under insurance tie-ups must get a GST registration because we have to give them a breakup?
No, sir. We don't have to give them a breakup. See, in the breakup also, only if you have GST taxable items, you have to take a GST registration number.
Okay.
Like, if, for example, if you have a insurance tie-up with an, okay, coming back to the insurance, Guma Fira ke aayi gaya sir. So, coming back to the insurance billing, if you have an agreed package with the insurance, you can bill it in a single line as a package. You don't have to give a breakup for cashless.
Okay.
There, GST is not applicable.
I get it.
However, if you are going for an open billing, you are giving a bill for a reimbursement, and you are going to give them a bill for surgeon charges, OT charges, room rent, anesthesia charges, and consumable cost or implant cost. Now, this particular bill has got two components, goods component and service component.
Correct.
The services, being health services, is exempt from GST, but the goods component is not exempted from GST.
Got it.
There you have to support that main invoice with separate GST invoice for each and every goods item that which is there, since they are not under ambit of, they are taxable under GST.
Got it. Got it.
It is always better that if you have, put it in a package case according to the package rate and push it off without giving a breakup.
Perfect.
So even for reimbursement cases, you mean that like
yes,
you just
in reimbursement cases, what Bide sir said sometime back, that he gives the vendor invoice and gives a surgeon fee and exempt invoice are separate. That would be the best way to give for reimbursement billing. Aditi ma'am is disconnected.
She's there.
Yeah. So in reimbursement, it is best that you give the vendor invoice directly, along with, don't include implant and other consumables. Give a gross total OT charges, give a gross total surgeon fee, because these are exempt from the GST. You don't have to apply for GST. But if you want to bill for cap, mask, gloves, syringes, which are pharmacy items, then you have to have a GST registration.
Then in a reimbursement bill, can we give it as a package only? In a reimbursement bill also, that we have this package?
No.
See, I'll just give my opinion about this. So in GST, what we have this concept of composite supply. So what does this composite supply mean? It says that when there are two or more supplies in one transaction, and one of them is a principal supply, then whatever the rate is applicable to the principal supply needs to be applied on the entire package. Now, let me give you an example here. You go and purchase a laptop. Along with the laptop, you get a bag, right? And you purchase the laptop bag and the laptop. Whatever rate is applicable to the laptop, same thing will be charged on the bag also. Ultimately, your main principal supply is the laptop here and not your bag. Another example, if you purchase an air conditioner's GST rate is 28%. Apart from that, you also pay him for erection and installation of the AC in your house. And he charges for that also and gives in one invoice supply of air conditioner and installation of air conditioner. Same rate of 28% will apply to the installation also, because the principal supply is air conditioner. Now, coming back to our example here. If your main service is exempt, and the gloves, etc., whatever GST taxable products you are using is because you are providing the main service as exempt, then my view is even the consumables what you are using, though it is chargeable in general terms, if you just randomly sell it across the counter, it is chargeable to GST. But here what you're doing, you're using that in connection with the main exempt or medical service, which is not chargeable to GST. So you need not charge GST on the consumables as well.
So the problem we are facing is the moment we give a consumable as a separate a head in the main bill, the insurance companies ask for supporting invoice for the consumable.
Yeah. So in that case, I mean, you'll have to justify with this, whatever I said, or take a GST registration and give a separate invoice for consumer.
So what I am doing in my hospital is that for the convenience, I have a GST registration. I will beautifully generate an invoice, sub-invoice for that and hand it over to the insurance company, which makes the work smoother.
Whatever I've said is applicable only if you give one invoice for the entire thing. For the tree. But if you give two separate invoices, have a GST registration, that is a win-win situation.
Or maybe patient may not get reimbursed for the consumables. That's the worst possible situation.
Correct.
And that value is very less, so patients don't mind that.
So, Vignesh sir, one more thing, just we have tried to tell everybody that we should take GST registration, but I think you should tell in very minutely, what are the fines and penalties if you don't file GST on time?
Yeah, see, there are multiple fines and penalties. First thing is, if you don't file your return on time, there is a late fee which is applicable up to 50 rupees per day. 50 rupees per day is the late fee. Your due dates, two due dates, you have to keep it in mind. Very simple. One is your 10th and one is your 20th. Within these two dates, you make sure that you file your GST returns. You'll not be bothered with penalties for late filing. Also, if you are due to pay the GST, that is by 20th, you are supposed to, like, for example, in the month of June, I have collected GST from my patients. I have to pay that GST before 20th of July. If I don't pay this GST before 20th of July, then for every day, 18% per annum interest is applicable proportionately. 18% per annum based on the number of days. That is now auto-calculated by the department in the site itself. Earlier, we used to calculate and decide and pay it, but now the system auto-calculates it and we have to pay that. So so it is very simple. Actually, if you see, it is not very complicated. Just give 2 days, not even 2 days. I would say just say 1 hour per month, half an hour before 10th and half an hour before 20th. That will make sure that because you all have softwares which tracks your sales and a lot of, technical things which are there, which shows how much revenue you have made per month. So it's not at all a big challenge in reporting that. So these are just few penalties. You should make sure that you file your returns on time. Then if your turnover is more than 2 crores per annum, then you also have to file something called as an annual return on a yearly basis, which is like a summary of all the GST returns what you have filed. And then if your turnover is more than 5 crores per annum, then you have to file another reconciliation statement between your books and whatever you have filed on the GST returns. If there's any variation, well, the reasons for the variation needs to be mentioned, and this return also needs to be filed. So these are some basic compliances what are there. I would suggest you to, go make sure that you just spend some amount of time. It is very easy to understand. It's not very difficult.
Any other question, Dr. Motevar, sir?
No, everything is clear.
Okay. So, any other question, Dr. Bide, sir? Aditi?
Sir, one small thing.
Yes.
One thing is that the moment you maintain a GST number, it's very interesting to note that, like, I have a business account in the flight booking, say like Amazon business tak. I have a business account everywhere. You end up getting higher discounts. Point number one. Second is whatever expenses I make through these, the entire invoices are automatically tracked into my GST 3B. Correct, sir? Vignesh sir?
Correct.
So the moment, like, if when my accountant has to ask me that, sir, is bar ka kya kharcha hua, whatever expenses, most of the things he doesn't ask me only. He can only just open the 3B, he will be able to see it. So he'll be getting an automatic statement of your expenses there. He needs to just correlate that regularly. So this is one important thing that you should know.
That's great. I think GST is something that I think in healthcare, very few doctors understand, and we are very happy that Dr. Hari puts in so much of effort to understand these nuances of insurance and GST that majority of the ophthalmologists really run away from. Or, but he has the, I think, the meticulous mind to understand this and probably also percolate this knowledge to everybody.
And I think now it's pretty much well known among the ophthalmologists regarding Dr. Hari's. I was chatting with an ophthalmologist friend of mine in the morning. When I shared the flyer with him, he spoke very kind words about Dr. Hari. He's like, it's very good. He takes a lot of initiatives in educating the fellow doctors with regard to non-medical stuff. So I think now he's pretty much well renowned for this.
Absolutely, absolutely.
If you have any problem in GST or in insurance, you just have to say Hari, Hari. Hari will save you.
Not
If
always.
Hari is there is no worry for ophthalmologists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Superb, superb. So I think with that, I think it was a very, very educational and probably eye-opener session, because majority of the ophthalmologists, they actually would like to, in a way, they want to stay away from GST, but you have also brought in what are the advantages of having the GST number, and that the compliances probably are not so hectic. So maybe half an hour per 15 days or a month is what the CA Vignesh has discussed. And as I think Dr. Hari has been using GST from the day one of his hospital, he has put forth how he is utilizing it very well. So I think we would like to thank from MOS both Dr. Hari and CA Vignesh for their time and a very lucid discussion because of that. And over to Dr. Bidesar for the last words also.
Thank you, Vardhaman. Excellent webinar on GST. It was an eye-opener. And I think if you're smart enough like Dr. Hari, and if your CA is as good as Vignesh, then I'm sure that you should take GST number. Otherwise, you have to do a lot of homework. You have to decide and then only go for GST number, because our service as an ophthalmologist doesn't come under preview of GST. Luckily, we are still happy that we are not covered under GST. But of course, GST, having GST, as I said, is a double-edged sword. You should know how to use it. Like Dr. Hari uses it very efficiently and very effectively. But if you don't use it properly, then there may be some problems. But it was a very good webinar with lots of inputs from CA Vignesh and always from Dr. Hari also. So thank you from Maharashtra Ophthalmological Society for joining for this webinar. And over to you, Vardhaman.
Thank you, sir. So at the end, now I would like to probably request Dr. Aditi, who is Secretary of Scientific Committee, to give the official vote of thanks. Yes.
So wonderful webinar, actually, like atypical, but still very relevant to all ophthalmologists. So I would like to thank Mr. Vignesh, CA Vignesh, and Dr. Hari for giving the great insights about GST. And also I would like to thank our own Honorary President, Dr. Bidesar, our Treasurer, Motevar Sir, and Secretary, Dr. Anaga Herur Madam, for being the panelists and like making everything very interactive. And yes, thank you, Vardhaman, for getting this idea rolled on, and like amazing webinar. Thank you once again, CA Vignesh and Dr. Hari. Looking forward to like few more interactive webinars on these. I won't say non-clinical, I would still say paraclinical things, not exactly typical paraclinical, but they are equally needed. Yes, thank you so much.
We would like to thank Entod also for their technical support, and Mr. Rahul Jain for his technical support.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you, everyone. I think we will meet all of you again with one exciting webinar soon enough. And thank you again, Dr. Hari and CA Vignesh and all our MOS leadership. Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
How have you stopped here?